Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. Thank you so much for being here today. Brooke and I are going to get real personal today, like we always do, but this is going to be even more personal because we are talking about menstruation.
Yeah. Woo, woo.
We are talking about cycle syncing, and we have the perfect person here. We are so excited to welcome Jacqueline, aka the Menstrual Mogul. Welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I cannot wait to get into this. I feel like this is something that I keep seeing all over. And up until recently, I didn't even know this was a thing. And I feel like a lot of women feel that way of like, wait, what do you mean? Like seeing these things of like women are cyclical. Whoa, tough word. And men aren't, right? So we have to be aware of where we are in the time of month and then match our workouts and our food and all these things. I'm like, this is fascinating. And Jacqueline, I'd love for you to start with how you got into this work because it is so niche.
Is niche, and it's a crazy story of how I got into this. I actually had been in a health and fitness multi-level marketing business for a few years in my early 20s, about like 10 years ago. And it was very much so one size fits all workout and nutrition programs. You can take your guess of which company that was with. But on paper, everything looked great. I was skinny. I had a six-figure business, a team of 1,000 coaches. And I thought that everything was going right. We were seeing results. However, it led down to a road of burnout for me personally, not just from the business side, but from the health and fitness side too. I was not eating anything until 11 a.m. and just living off of caffeine. My cortisol was skyrocketing. I was on my phone all the time, had no boundaries around work and personal life, and a lot of relationships, a lot of other things in my life were sacrificed in the name of being a girl boss. This was in the heyday of the girl boss Gary Vee era, which I still have PTSD from. So I eventually, I kept going down that road with the one size fits all health and fitness plans that I felt like I could stick to most of the time, but then there were other times where I couldn't, and I thought it was a me problem, a consistency problem. And so after many years of just following program after program and also like girl bossing way too close to the sun, I moved from Pennsylvania to Wyoming to be with my now husband. And it was a much different pace of life. And I definitely used that move cross country to tap out. I was burnt out. I no longer wanted to be a slave to a calendar or portion containers or being on the internet 24/7 for my job. So I really just completely let all of that go for many years. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit and knew that I would come back to something, but I never knew what that would be. So I just gave myself time to get a regular job with guaranteed income and really just experience the great outdoors here in Jackson Hole. And so how cycle syncing and this very niche topic fell into my lap is I was walking with a dear friend of mine, and she's a doula, so she has a lot of knowledge around your cycle and things. And I was having period symptoms like spotting or something. I forget what it was, but she's like, that's not very normal. You should read this book and learn more about your cycle. And it was right as the pandemic was hitting. So I was like, okay, I have nothing better to do. I love to learn new things about health and wellness. And it was the book Fix Your Period by Nicole Jardim, which is an amazing book. And I remember reading the fact that if you are on hormonal birth control pill, the hormonal birth control pill, that you're not having a real period. And as someone who used to be on the pill in my teens to 20s, that blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. And it led me down this rabbit hole of if I didn't know this, what else didn't I know? And into my lap fell cycle syncing, the fact that we go through 4 phases throughout the course of our cycle, and that different foods, different styles of movement benefit you most and optimize your health and fitness goals during different parts of your cycle. And so with my history in that health and fitness field, I found it fascinating. And so I started adapting the food and fitness to my cycle and saw amazing results, completely eliminated PMS and painful periods, which I had had my entire life. I was literally glued to my heating pad and had very heavy periods most of my life. And then it also, after I felt like I mastered that, I began to do the business side of things. And I was like, there's something here. This is a void that needs to be filled in so many women's life, not just in the health and fitness atmosphere, but also the business side of things too. So now I am a cycle syncing coach where I do help what I call not your average women who just want to have less painful periods, no PMS. I help them. And then I also help female entrepreneurs sync their business and strategy to their cycle too.
And today you're going to help us because one of us, I won't name names, but is dying with her period cramps. And this could not be better timing.
So she can help you with that and with our business.
I know.
I just let out the cat out of the bag.
But I love it, right? Because this, like Andrea and I were saying earlier, we don't know anything about this.
And we've had periods forever and have them every month. And we need to know about this. We need to understand this. So Brooke and I are lifelong learners. And this is like something I feel like we should have learned the second we got our period, just to help us in high school, to help us in college, to help us with our relationships. And like you said, with fitness and why we aren't in the mood to work out, like what is going on. And so let's start breaking this down into what these 4 phases are, what they mean, and how we kind of use this information to apply it to our daily lives.
Of course. So cycle syncing in general is just matching your outside habits with what's happening internally so that you feel less resistance, less stress, less guilt in your day-to-day life. And I find with my clients that simply just knowing this is a thing is a huge weight off of your shoulder. You realize all this mental beating up that you've done on yourself wasn't your fault and you didn't deserve it. So it's a big fat permission slip that we all need as menstruating females. So basically the way that I break down the 4 phases, so just as kind of like a starter tip, or not tip, but a fact for you, is you mentioned men and their hormones and everything like that. So men kind of experience their hormone quote unquote cycle as Groundhog Day. It resets every 24 hours with their circadian rhythm. That's why men wake up with a surge of testosterone in the morning, which gives them morning wood, and it wanes throughout the day. They sleep and then it resurges again, right? And multiple hormones, not just testosterone. And then for women, our hormones fluctuate throughout the course of a whole month, and it's actually called the infradian rhythm. So that's kind of what matches up with our cycle, and the 4 phases happen within the infradian rhythm. So it's a second bodily clock that many women are unknowingly ignoring. Our period and our cycle is considered our 5th vital sign. That's how strongly it influences our overall health. So to ignore it is to ignore like a huge component of just who you are as a human, specifically a female. So what are the 4 phases of our cycle? And I love to break it down and correlate it in a way that you can remember. So I'm going to go over and correlate them to the 4 seasons of the year. This is very much a strong connection with traditional Chinese medicine, which I enjoy so much. I think it just makes so much sense. So we'll start with the phase that I know everyone knows, which is your menstrual phase, your period. And so this is the winter phase of your cycle. This is a time, if you think about wintertime, especially the end of the year in winter before New Year's, you're feeling reflective, you're feeling analytical, kind of just want to stay at home and cocoon, and you're thinking about everything that's happened this past year. And so it's also cold, so you're eating a lot of warming foods and things like that. And so during the menstrual phase of your cycle, you definitely are feeling those reflective and analytical feelings. The 2 hemispheres in your brain are communicating clearer than ever during this phase, and your hormones are actually at their lowest. So the term "you're still hormonal on your period" like really is not a valid fact or point at all. And so you can give people the big middle finger when they say that to you, specifically men. But if you think about it, you definitely are eating warming foods like beets and mushrooms, and also you want to replenish the blood that you're losing during that. So there's a lot of like iron and minerals and fermented foods that go into the food categories that support what's happening internally during your menstrual phase of your cycle. And so it's really time to turn inward, to listen to yourself, and ideally you'll have this reflective analytical feeling. You know, if you are dealing with painful periods, it might come once you feel that relief that that pain's kind of over, you know, after the first 1 or 2 days. But if you've been cycle syncing, you wouldn't be experiencing that. So you kind of feel those feelings right off the bat once you get your period. And if you think about it, during your period, you're shedding your lining, right? Your uterine lining. And you can think of that metaphorically too. Like, what do you need to let go of? What can you quote unquote shed from your life that's no longer serving you? Listen during that phase of your cycle. It's really important. And so after winter, we enter spring, which is like such a vibe, such a fun feeling. And this is called the follicular phase of your cycle. And it's around 7 to 10 days, depending on what your cycle is like. And if you think about springtime, think of how you're just ready to burst out after a long winter, right? You can finally wear flip-flops, maybe. You are feeling creative and you really want to just take action on whatever it is that you feel like you have been wanting to take action on. And so also in spring, we're eating much lighter foods. We have more energy, so our workouts are a little bit more intense. And it's a time where you can just like really lean into your creative superpowers and wanting to plan things out for maybe your summer or the rest of the year. However, the caveat here is that most women get this surge of energy during the follicular phase, and they think that this is their new baseline, that this is their new, you know, ground zero. So they plan out the rest of their month or the rest of whatever as if they'll always have this energy. And you're finding out right now that that's not the case. So that's where I used to really fall short and set way too high expectations of myself in the future when I'm in a different phase of my cycle. And so then after spring comes summer, and this is your ovulatory phase. So this is the 3 to 5 days where you could be ovulating. And if you think of summertime, I think like right now I am wearing my Skims. I dyed my hair blonde. It is my Beyonce, Taylor Swift era. I am just confident. And during ovulation, you primarily are trying to attract a mate, right? But that doesn't mean you can't attract your dreams, your goals, the things you want in life. It can be a very, very powerful time. Your communication is very, very on point during this phase of your cycle. So if you, business wise, I love to end a launch in my ovulatory phase because I'm really going to call those people that I want to join my offer or my services in. And so we have our hot girl summer. We don't really want to be sitting behind a computer during hot girl summer or the ovulatory phase. We just want to be out socializing, taking action. But then comes fall, and fall is our luteal phase of our cycle, and that's around 10 to 14 days. This is where the PMS could happen. This is where I call it the danger zone. Your cortisol, your stress hormone is already very touchy during this phase of your cycle. So if you don't have the right boundaries and other things in place, it could be a mess, which I'm sure we've all experienced. And so during the luteal phase, it's the fall phase. It's 10 to 14 days. And if you think of fall, we're eating a lot of pumpkin spice everything, or just pumpkin everything, acorn squash, butternut squash. We are just enjoying all those root vegetables, and they are very beneficial during the luteal phase of your cycle. Protein and eating carbs that are easy for your body to digest are crucial. You actually need 100 to 300 more calories throughout the course of your luteal phase. So I talked about being on a one size fits all nutrition plan in the past, and this 2-week period is where I would feel like a failure. During my end of menstrual, follicular, and even some of ovulatory phase, I could follow a meal plan like nobody's business. It could be low carb, it could be whatever, and I had no problem following it. But I sometimes call the luteal phase just being hangry, because we're under eating as women a lot of the time. We're not eating enough protein. We're not eating frequently throughout the day. And we're not eating those complex carbs that our body needs, because our body temperature is up during this phase of our cycle. And when you eat more frequently and the right type of nutrients, you're going to feel a lot more stable in your mood, in your cravings, and so many other things. And it completely eliminates PMS. My clients and I have completely gotten rid of PMS. And so that's kind of how it all ties together. Also in the fall phase, you're kind of trying to like tidy things up after a chaotic summer where you're just like out and about and having a good old time. Fall is, details come into hyper focus during this fall phase of your cycle. So it's the get shit done behind the scenes phase of your cycle for many things, business, personal life, whatever. So that's kind of a breakdown of the 4 phases, and hopefully that's easy to remember for you and your listeners.
Oh, no, that was
so
good.
helpful.
And the way you broke it down was so easy to follow. I love that. And I feel like I've heard that before, kind of comparing it to seasons. It's easy for the brain to remember. I'm like, before recording, I'm like, I think there's a follicular phase or a luteal, or I don't remember. So even just hearing like seasons, it makes sense, right? Okay, I know how to nourish my body. I'm curious how we start implementing this. Like, what do you recommend for your clients? Like, you share, okay, now I've got it. Now, how do I actually implement this in my life without being extremely overwhelmed?
Absolutely. So I always tell my clients, I will over deliver, but I will never overwhelm you, because I think with many different types of diets or maybe even fitness programs, we're adding in something new most of the time, right? And so what I do with my clients is rearrange what they're already doing. They're already eating. Most of them are already moving. They are already just implementing their day-to-day habits. All I do is I kind of Marie Kondo reorganize it to match not only where they are in their cycle, but also like just to sync more with it so they feel less resistance. So how I have a few things that I definitely repeat over and over again, but I'll go over the ones that definitely give my clients the most bang for their buck. I just started a 28-day cycle syncing challenge with them, and they're only 5 days in, and already they're like, is this some voodoo magic? I feel so much better already. Like, they can't believe it. So I'm going to break it down to a few tips for you. So the first thing that I see as far as like getting started with this is, let's make sure you're having breakfast before caffeine. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. And I feel like we've been misled as women to believe that intermittent fasting is really, really beneficial to us. And there's no doubt that there's benefits of fasting. However, as menstruating women, we are not included in many studies. When it comes to intermittent fasting and physical health, like exercise, it is really hard to follow a menstruating woman because of these phases that we go through throughout the course of our cycle. So we're just left out of the equation. Many studies are done on men or postmenopausal women. So intermittent fasting is really great for postmenopausal women. However, if you did still want to fast in your day-to-day life, I would just suggest stopping eating at night earlier and letting that fast happen overnight naturally when you sleep, and then making sure you eat within a half hour of waking up. Many of my clients get resistant when they hear this, of the notion of eating before coffee. But number one, I will never ask you to give up your coffee. I'm not a mean hormone coach like that. Like, this is some people's coveted cup of happiness in the morning. So I'm not going to ask you to give that up. However, that first thing that you're drinking when you're waking up is shooting up your stress hormone, your cortisol, like crazy. So ideally, you would be having something with protein or healthy fats in it. But even if it's just fruit or just a protein shake or just anything, I start with getting anything in your stomach before coffee, and then you can build up. And I've seen myself and clients really be able to add on to reach higher protein options, but they see a slew of effects, especially in that fall phase of their cycle. They see so much less mood swings, feelings of hunger, and wanting to binge on everything salty or sugary. And it gives them energy that lasts them throughout the day just by doing that one thing, by adding a little bit of food before caffeine. And so the second thing I have them do is just choose 2 foods that are quote unquote phase friendly, is what I call them. So my clients always receive like a cheat sheet of foods that benefit each phase of their cycle. And honestly, you can look it up and probably find a version of that somewhere for yourself. But I give them a cheat sheet plus recipes that they can use. And just by eating a few foods that you already are probably eating. I mean, there's an array of vegetables, an array of fruit, and that's really helpful to support, again, what's happening internally. I mean, for instance, during our ovulatory phase, it's beneficial to eat spinach because it helps break down excess estrogen and helps your liver detox it. So many of us are running around with too much estrogen in our body, and that's why we have PMS and painful periods. So something like eating liver, or I'm sorry, not liver, eating spinach during a certain part of our cycle where estrogen is rising, making sure you're not like having too much of that, eating a food that can help break that down and help your liver break it down is gonna, again, help with those symptoms. So choosing just 2 foods that are phase friendly, you have to know what phase you're in, obviously, and track your cycle would be really, really helpful to get started. And then that kind of leads me to my last tip in getting started, but also it should have been the first probably, is that tracking your cycle is more than just tracking when you get your period and knowing that that's around the same time every month. As you now know, you go through 4 phases. And so it's important to know when you're in each phase and the projection of when you'll be in that. And so there's multiple apps, there's multiple ways that you can track that. And that's what I teach inside my courses. But that's going to be really, really helpful. And it should be something that you, number one, know where you are, but you're also bringing that into your day-to-day life. So I feel like with tracking cycles, we kind of leave it in the app wherever we're tracking it. But what if you like brought it into your personal calendar? What if you brought it into even a paper calendar? How can you bring your cycle to the forefront? Because we've been ignoring it since we were told about it. We've been told to ignore it. So it's going to take time, number one, to bring it back in and make her a star in your show. But I promise once you do, you're going to feel so much more ease and understanding about why you may be feeling the way you feel once you know where you are throughout the month in your cycle.
I totally feel this already from what you've just told so far. Just going through my last month and thinking about like last week, I was like, no, I'm socializing with friends. I'm going on a trip soon, and I was out and about with every single person. And then now I'm going into this weekend, I was like, I'm going to tidy up my house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so predictable. And then I'm going to have my period on my trip to Japan. Awesome. But I think for someone like me, it's really magical to know this. And like you said, to start to weave it in and to think about giving yourself some more grace or helping yourself out with these foods and thinking about those things. But I keep thinking about a lot of women just are irregular, right? It doesn't happen like this. Like for me, I'm so predictable. It's like day 28 and it's like, bam, here she is.
Or they're on the pill, like you said, and they're not getting a real period.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for people that are like, I don't even know when I got my period last, or it's never 28 days. Sometimes it's 40 days. Like, how does that work with these 4 seasons?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it truly is a case by case basis. I would not need to know some people's health history in answering that. But generally, I would say even some women on the pill, I would suggest to integrate cycle syncing, even though they're not getting a real period, but insert their withdrawal bleed, which is essentially what that bleed on the pill is. Enter that into your cycle tracking app that gives you projections of when you'll be in each phase. And that's a great way to practice and prime your body for getting off of birth control, because I know that can be a whole thing too. And your body will enjoy that cyclical way of living. And then also it'll be like hopefully be less of a burden when you get off of the pill. But as far as for women who are irregular, I really think that reducing, and this is such an eye roll statement, but reducing your stress is a huge thing that can help bring things down. Stress, to put it lightly, stress affects your ovulation, and when ovulation is delayed, it affects when your period comes. So there is a brain stress hormone connection, and it is not to be taken lightly. To give you an example, I've been cycle syncing for 3 years now. I have pretty regular periods. However, I am not perfect. I travel by plane from time to time. I have had stressful life events happen that are completely out of my control. And so, for instance, when last summer, I use this example all the time in my business last summer, I thought it was a good idea the week of my period to do like a big sale within my business that included me being on camera a lot, selling a lot, being very social during my winter phase of my cycle. Does that sound like a good idea? No, but I was really excited. I was under new mentorship and I just wanted to like give and play, and I went against my own advice. And so with cycle syncing, what you do this month affects what your next period is like. So this is often why I work with clients 3 to 6 months, because 1 month is just never enough. So what did that mean? This was in July, this big sale extravaganza. What happened in August? I had one of the worst periods of my life that like I had had in many years. I was tied to my heating pad. I had to push back another launch, so that left money on the table. And I definitely had my cortisol and stress just out of wazoo. So to think that stress does not affect your cycle is just not true, and we can't ignore it. So I really think that reducing stressors, having boundaries around things like social media and your phone and people, and not to mention boundaries should fluctuate throughout the course of your cycle. Routines should fluctuate throughout the course of your cycle. But really keeping that stress under management, and then adding in these cycle syncing tips that I give around food and fitness, that's going to be really, really helpful and hopefully get you more regular.
You talk about tracking, and so I'm curious what apps you recommend. Are there certain ones that stand out to you that you have your clients use? Because I know everyone listening is wondering.
Yes. So I really wish I had the perfect answer for this, but I think it is a person by person basis. And then I feel like I do have to do a little bit more research. I just had the My Flow app, FLO, for many, many years, but literally today they just did a whole overhaul and update, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. So I don't feel 1,000% recommending that until I know more, but I know Natural Cycles is a great app, or the 28 app I've heard is really great. I personally have an Aura ring and they track my temperature. So a way that you can track your cycle is by tracking your basal body temperature every single day. What I love about cycle syncing is you can be as tedious and detailed about it, or as abstract and whatever about it. And I always err on the side of loosey goosey, because I think that's what most women can be consistent with. So I do look at my Aura ring and like it's there, the information is already there. So that's great. But I've just used the My Flow app for many years. And I found, and that's by Alyssa Vitti, the woman that you read her book. But I found that even just learning about this information, you're going to know when these shifts happen and take place. And even just knowing that is great, because my type A ladies have a little bit of trouble with cycle syncing at first, because they think this phase ends on this day, and then I enter this phase at midnight on this day, and that's not the way it works. So it is kind of airy transition between phases. And some people like that, some people don't. But that's what I enjoy about it, is that you don't have to be perfect with it to see results.
What I like hearing about your coaching is it sounds really holistic, right? Like you're going to shift one thing that's going to affect another. And the fact that it sounds like you're really turning women towards healthier options with food, and so, which is going to help your gut health and your hormone health. And I just think that's so important that, you're going to weave in sleep, you're going to weave in stress management, you're thinking about what kind of workouts make sense. And just the more we understand ourselves, the more that we can move through this life just a little bit more smoothly, a little bit more grace. And I'm already just like feeling some freedom thinking about this. It's like making me emotional. Like how many women are going to be like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just what it is right now. And so I'm going to just tell my friends, hey, not today. I'm in winter. Spring is coming, but it's not yet.